Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Painted in Color podcast. I'm co-host Lauren Brown, and today I'm joined by co-host Mia Araujo and Eric Wilkerson. We are going to talk about a really, really hot topic within the art community that I feel like every single artist has had a conversation around or has had to struggle with, and that topic is imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is really funny because I feel like it plagues artists no matter if they're an amateur or if they're a professional, seasoned professional who's been working 10, 20 years, they still experience that. And so I feel like it's a really good topic to bring up and have a full episode about, even though we've touched on it in multiple previous episodes. This is going to be an in-depth conversation about imposter syndrome and what to do now that you know you're a fraud. So how are you doing, Mia? How you doing, Eric?
Oh my God, am I a fraud?
Are you a fraud? I don't know. Are you? I often feel like I'm a fraud, so I'm just saying. Do you feel like a fraud? Ever? It's good if you don't. I would love it if you don't.
You know what? Not anymore.
Oh.
So I'll start it off by saying that.
Teach us your ways.
Yeah, please.
Well, at some point, it's kind of like, I hate to quote Yoda because I'm constantly quoting Yoda.
I don't think it would be a video with you without you quoting something about Star Wars or Star Trek.
It's not gonna happen. It's just not gonna. It's not gonna happen.
Like at this point, I expect it, and I think that's great.
Kind of like there's somebody out there that can relate everything in life to an episode of Friends and be like, Chandler and blah. Well, I don't know their names, but you know what I'm saying? Like they're like, you just know this stuff, and they were like, anyway. So I keep thinking you either do or you do not. So.
There is no try.
There is no try. At some point, somebody's going to contact you and they're going to say, can you do this job or not? Are you available? And that imposter syndrome will kick in and you'll be like, oh my God, do they really want me? Is the email correct? Did they accidentally email me when they meant
you're
to?
looking behind you. It's like, did they mean?
Yeah.
Like what?
But then you go, oh, that's right. I got bills to pay. I got rent. I don't have time to sit here and think about whether I'm good enough or not. They contacted me and I responded back and they said, cool, here's how much it pays. And I said, great. And, and then I pay my bills. But before that, sure. Before those moments started to roll in, you always think to yourself, well, why am I even doing this? Like nobody's responding, nothing's happening. Should I even call myself a professional illustrator, a professional artist? What is the new term people call themselves now? Independent. I'm an independent artist. Mm-hmm. I'm an independent artist.
Pop that collar.
I don't need nothing from nobody. I'm independent, right?
I'm not unemployed. I'm independent.
Exactly.
Right. Like, but before all that, you think to yourself, well, nobody's asking for it. Nobody's asking for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So why should I even call myself this fancy title? That gets stuck in a lot of people's heads.
Yeah.
So
you start to think that your work is not worth anything or not worth attention or notice or acknowledgement by anybody because you're telling yourself this narrative that people don't really need to see what you're offering. And it's a narrative that's so false because everybody has a different thing to offer, I think. And even if it's not to the point where you want it to be yet, you're still growing and learning. And I feel like imposter syndrome very often makes you stop doing that as much as you should be because you're doubting yourself the whole time. And it puts this roadblock in the way of just like, well, it's not going to be good anyway. So why should I even do it? And it's just a huge like wall that's in front of you. And some people can find the little cracks in the wall and like skirt through it while they're like surrounded on both sides by this like closed in space. And some people just have that solid wall right in front of them that stops them from doing it in the first place. And rarely do people actually make it out of the other side of the imposter syndrome wall and are able to exist without it, I think. And where I definitely am at is inside the cracks of the walls where I'm doing it anyway. But boy, was that wall in the way for a long time. It really was. And, it would stop me. Like, I think I told this story before, probably for my interview, but Gen Con was a great example of that wall being in the way and preventing me from creating the things that I wanted to create, because I felt so much like I just didn't belong in the space with so many amazing artists that I admire for years, that I was like, well, whatever I make isn't going to measure up to what I think the standard should be. So I was like, I came into decision paralysis where I was just like, well, I could create this, but I don't think it's good enough. And I could create that, but I don't think it's good enough. And what ended up happening was I only created one piece for Gen Con. Now that piece was the piece where I actually got into the cracks of the wall and was like, all right, I'm going to do it anyway and be self-indulgent. And it turned out to be one of my most popular pieces. But that whole year was just a year of just fear, pure fear and indecision. And, I wonder what I could have created without that fear. But I think I needed to experience it too, to get through to the other side and realize that my voice is unique and it's okay to express that. But it by no means means that like I have gotten past that wall yet. I'm still very much inside that little crack. To use a weird metaphor, but that's my metaphor for it.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think that's a great image. I feel like imposter syndrome, at least for me, is rooted in being a perfectionist, and not only that, in like, I feel like we've all been taught these really, really harmful myths of what an artist is or what a good artist is, and we might all have our own variations of that, but I feel like it's overall, whatever that is incredibly unrealistic, incredibly unattainable, and probably not something that any flawed human being can be at all times. And the artist friends of mine that I've talked to about imposter syndrome, we have this in common, where it's like, even if we have any of those traits, whether it's like we're prolific or we create a consistent body of work, but we don't tick every box, then suddenly we're an imposter in some way.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I think some of those myths though are just like, I think when we were young artists especially, we learned about like the child prodigies, or some people think that, that talent is innate, and that just means if you're struggling, then you're not talented or you're not really an artist, like all these kinds of myths that I think kind of get in our way. At least for me, is just something that I feel like more and more, the older I get, the more I just realize, hey, this unattainable sort of standard that I'm holding myself to, that's preventing me from saying I'm a real artist or that I belong here, is actually not really realistic. And it sort of makes my own standards for myself just be ridiculous. And that's why I'm my worst critic, because I just feel like I have to hit all these boxes before I can say I'm actually an artist or I've actually succeeded. And again, everybody's definition of success is different. Like whether that's, I have to make money off my art only, and I have to make a lot of money off my art, or I have to win all the awards, or I have to have this many followers. Like those are all like metrics that we use about who's arrived or who's successful. And then there's another side of it. I think for me in the gallery world, for instance, like putting my art on a wall and saying, like, how dare you put your art on a wall next to all these people, that are way better artists than you. That's really intimidating. And then even just in terms of writing your own story, it's like, who are you to write a book? Like, who are you to tell a story? It's like, there are these kind of lofty ideals that we have about what these different types of artists are. And it's just, I feel like I love Eric's answer. It's just like, either do it or don't, like that. It should just be as simple as that, instead of all the mind stuff we do.
I'm gonna have to be that counter argument person, like on The View. I'm just gonna be on the corner of the table, just not
the devil's advocate, anything but that.
And I don't, oh God, I don't want it to sound like I'm just so full of myself, but I never had that feeling of imposter syndrome when it came to creating the art. Like I never felt like I'm not as good as. I had that feeling back in college when I was seeing the work of, other students that have gone on to like stellar careers in illustration, sitting right next to me in class and looking at their stuff going, oh my God, I'm wasting my parents' money. Oh my God. I dealt with all of that in school. But there was always that voice in the back of my head, which sounded a lot like my dad saying, if you don't do it, I'm going to get your mama's money back.
Oh, wow. You had the fire under your butt from the
There
beginning.
was that fire. Like, I have 4 years to learn how to do this and be as good as the people that are out there doing it professionally, or as close as humanly possible, so that I can prove to my parents that I didn't waste their money. Right? So when you have that, constantly trying to prove to them afterwards, like, I got this job doing this and it's paying this much money, or see, ma, see, dad, I didn't waste your money. There was always that thing. But when it came to, for me, imposter syndrome comes from having that feeling when you're doing something for the first time and have absolutely no experience at it. And like, when I took on my first job as a concept artist, I was just going off of what I read from people's experiences on conceptart.org and what I should be charging as an hourly rate, and all these massive Black articles and stuff like that people were talking about the industry and what you need to know. And I'm like, okay, I got a good idea of what this is about. And then people ask me questions and I'm like, oh God, I have no idea how to answer this. And I'm in the meeting, I'm like sweating, like trying to figure out like how I should answer it. I don't have one of those fancy portfolios full of turnarounds and 3D models and ZBrush and stuff. And I'm like, oh man, why did I apply for this? So, it's for real now. But you have to go, you have to just do it. You have to just do it. It's either that or you get up and go, I'm sorry, I don't belong here, I'm just gonna leave.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the exact kind of energy that prevents a lot of people from applying to jobs or like going after what they want to go for in the first place. Like I've known so many people who were like, I've sent them job recommendations. I'm like, hey, I know you don't fulfill every single one of these qualifications, kind of like what you were saying, Mia, where like you have to check off all these boxes. I was like, I know you don't fill all of them, but I think you could do this job. I've seen you work before. I think you'd be great. And so many people have just been like, no, I don't think I can do it actually, because I don't know this, and that. And I'm like, I don't think you need to know. Do you know how many people apply to these jobs without filling most of these things? And it's like, you only are missing like 3 of those things. I think you can get those within like a month. And like, that's usually what happens. That's totally normal for any like game animation, any of the industries. But that doubt and that fear prevents them from actually going for it. And I could say, like, regardless of the fact that if I didn't feel like I was deserving of a role, which is a lot of the time, honestly, I would still go for it anyway, just because I'm like, I might as well try and I might as well see what happens, even if I don't have all of the check marks, the boxes. And I was afraid while doing it, but I did it anyway, just because, again, it's that sense of necessity and that sense of, I have student loans to pay off and they are 6 figures. I need to get rid of them. This is how I'm going to get rid of these loans. So I had no choice but to say, I have to do this. But there's a lot of people who don't feel that push, because this industry has taught us that there is a value that's placed on every artist, and every artist is worth something based on whatever status they have, however many followers they have, however good they are. And that perfectionism can make us feel like we're worth less than if we're not at the level where we need to be. And I feel like that's such a lie, because I would rather go do the interview, go apply to that job, and let them determine whether I'm worth what they're actually looking for. And I feel like that's where you can really find your answers. That validation is there. But despite that validation, you often still face imposter syndrome, which I certainly do, but it's gotten better over the years. But I'm trying to live my life in a way that I'm going to do it anyway. But where I feel like it suffers for me is my personal projects and actually writing and illustrating, because I'm just like, I feel like I'm not going to do my own idea justice, which is bonkers. It's so stupid. Like, why wouldn't, it's my idea, why wouldn't I? But I often feel like I'm not ready, because I see so many other people execute it better. But at the very least, in my professional life, I've been trying to, I'm definitely like in a crack of the wall that's maybe a little bit wider and less constricting than my personal illustration life. So yeah.
But does that feeling of imposter syndrome, when you're trying to do your own creative stuff or doing professional stuff for other people, Does it come from the frustration because it's so saturated, because the field is so saturated and there's so many other people out there trying to do it?
No.
Or that you just don't feel like, I don't, I'm just trying to, I don't understand how somebody can go through 4 years of school or dedicate themselves to wanting to do something professionally and then say, you know what, I'm not as good as, I don't think I'm gonna do it. You know, I'm gonna bail out and find a job doing something else. Like,
Yeah.
why put yourself through that, all the struggles and all that practice to just psych yourself out?
Part of it is
Does that make
anxiety.
sense?
Yeah, part of it is anxiety. A big part of it is self-doubt. And it's just a lot of second guessing yourself and also prioritizing all the things that are absolutes rather than the unknowns. And the absolutes are my full-time job and any freelance that I have, because I know I have to do that and I have a brief of which to adhere to. Oftentimes when I'm making my own stuff, I'm like, but what is the point of this? But why am I making it? And I'm not just enjoying the simplicity and the process of making that art. I'm just psyching myself out because I feel like what I might be offering is just like, what is this even saying? What kind of message am I giving? But I think part of it too is just right now I'm in the process of changing and making my business more concrete. And it's it's a bit scary because I have all this stuff in front of me and I feel guilty focusing full time on it. And so I'm not dedicating the mental space that I need to anyway towards that. But I really, really want to. When I'm working during the day, that's when I have the most creativity. And then right after I'm done work, that's when it's just gone because I'm tired. So there's a lot of different layers to it. But mostly it's just, I mean, it's definitely silly. It's silly is what it is. But a lot of that is just anxiety and self-doubt.
Yeah, but you know, something I actually noticed too is that a lot of women feel this. And I know that it's like
Yes.
there's a lot of women in every industry that undersell themselves, that don't even dare apply for jobs. Like when you were talking about the experience that you're supposed to have, whenever
It's
I've
mostly
ever read
women.
those, I just assumed you need all of them, otherwise why bother? Whereas you're saying a lot of people do apply anyway. And I feel like it is a, you know, it's a thing that it's sort of been ingrained in us in terms of in this society anyway, that we're just not enough. And that, you know, and a lot of these art fields too are usually male dominated, and so you feel like an imposter in that way.
Mhm.
And then especially if you add intersectionality to that, that's even more compounded, you know, feelings, I'm sure, of feeling like an imposter or an outsider, or like how dare you be in this space, you know, you have, I'm sure
Mhm.
you have those sort of feelings. And I certainly wish that I had somebody like you when I was first out of school, like telling me to apply anyway, because I would just feel like if I didn't tick every box, I just didn't even try to apply.
Yeah.
And so I just tried making my own work, and that's worked for me in different ways. But I feel like there's a lot of people out there that don't even try because of how they've sort of been in some ways conditioned to think about themselves and their space in the world. So I think that's a huge part of it too. And it certainly doesn't affect everyone in the same way, but I think that's a huge component from the women's groups that I've been in terms of female artists. They tend to across the board have a lot of imposter syndrome when it comes to
Oh yeah.
just even applying to things, or submitting their stuff to like Imagine FX or any of these kinds of magazines. I remember the creative director there was like begging female artists to submit, because she's like, you never submit your stuff and we want to put more female artists out, and they always like want to wait till they're ready, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's absolutely true. Like it's an issue that is overwhelmingly like basically almost I think almost every female artist that I know or a film artist that I know has that fear and that feeling. And especially I think almost every Black female artist that I know definitely has it like really, really bad. And I remember being in a hotel room with just a bunch of these really talented artists, all Black, all female. And all of them were just like, oh, like, I don't think my work is good enough. I don't think I can apply to this thing. And like, I'm trying to encourage them. And like, my other friend is trying to encourage them too. But like, even my friend, and I don't remember if I talked about her before or not, but she's super talented, and her friend had to force her to apply to an animation studio job because like she was working at a movie theater and she was struggling and she was just living off of commissions. But she is just so good that when she did the art test, the manager thought that the employee who recommended her was the one who actually did it, because it was just she got everything like perfect.
Wow.
And he was like, did you help her with this? And she was like, no, I didn't. That was all her. And now she's the director of that department. But she was so afraid of that job that if she didn't have that friend supporting her and encouraging her, she wouldn't have even done it in the first place. And, you know, and if she's watching the show, she'll know who she is. I'm sorry, love. I love you very much. You're amazing. But, you know, it's like, I was just reading an article about this actually, where it really is an issue that plagues women because we are told that, you know, we're not enough and we're constantly having to push against these expectations that are put upon us, and also the lack of representation overall in the industry. You know, we didn't really have people to look up to when we were growing up, when we were really young. I didn't see any faces like mine between games or animation, you know, and you don't feel like that's the space for you. And your family oftentimes don't encourage that because they don't see any faces that look like you. So they're like, why would you even think that you can do this? Fortunately, my family wasn't such a one, but it still is an issue that plagues a lot of people of color. You know, and there's also language and hiring documentation that makes it just feel so masculine and just like, oh, you have to be the best of the best and you have to be a rock star artist or like, you know, or like high class, well performed, like just like all this language that's so aggressive. That's just like, it turns women away immediately. And my old studio was actually trying to fix that language because they realized that it was turning away a lot of women and a lot of people of color. And there's just a lot of different barriers that we need to get through, but there are so many qualified people out there that could be turned away from it just because of that fear and that doubt. So yeah, it's a multi-layered issue is really what it is.
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we get past it? Like, how can we start to combat our internal demons that are, you know, that are talking to us? Because like Mia, I know that, you know, oftentimes you talk about it and you think about this often.
Oh yeah. I mean, I honestly feel like social media has exacerbated it. And I feel like imposter syndrome has existed before, but it's worse now because all we see is perfection, right? All we see is the shiny veneer of someone's career that they want us to see. And we see the final result a lot. And even, you know, when artists just had museums and books to look at, they saw just the final result. So now we actually get to see more of the process. But I think what's tricky about it all is just that social media tends to reward or like, you know, reward behavior of like showing off your successes and not necessarily the struggles and stuff. And for me, actually, I think part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast with you guys was to kind of be more transparent about how hard it is to be an artist, instead of just like, I felt like I was hearing a lot about people who were making a ton of money and being super successful right out of the gate,
Yeah.
or like getting the big jobs and stuff. And that's all great, but it doesn't really help me when I'm like nowhere near that. It feels like, you know, and I feel like a lot of artists feel the same. And so at least for me, it's just been about the sort of information that I surround myself with, the people I surround myself with, that they have more realistic goals for themselves, and that I'm usually been competitive with myself, if that makes sense. But I know there's a lot of artists that surround themselves with people that are really competitive with each other, and that might feed them. But for me, that's something that would not feed me at all. It would just make me feel, it would feed my imposter syndrome if I surrounded myself with people like that. And so it's just little things like that, just knowing what inspires you versus what drains you. And for me, definitely one of the things this year was staying away from social media and just focusing more on being present. And honestly, it's like, I think that I think just being realistic with myself, in the sense that part of imposter syndrome is that if you dare call yourself an artist, or you dare to imply that you're any kind of master, you know, that you feel like you're lying to someone, that you're a fraud because you're not actually that thing. And for me, what I've just realized is like, I don't actually claim to be either of those things. I'm honestly just a student, and I enjoy that. You know, to me, that's like way less pressure. I like learning a lot, and I know I'm going to learn for the rest of my life, and that's all I want to do. And if I get better, great. And it's like, I want to, you know, tell my own stories and paint my own pictures and stuff, but all through just learning. And so for me, it's just almost like setting that realistic expectation in my own head, as opposed to some kind of lofty thing that I might hold myself up against in a negative way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny too, because like when I was starting this podcast, I was still having imposter syndrome about this too, of just being like, I'm no expert. How dare I start a podcast? Like, you know, like people are supposed to listen to me. I haven't even figured out everything yet, but that's the beauty of it, is the fact that we haven't figured everything out. And there's so many other people who also are in that same boat, and encouraging that honest conversation and being more vulnerable allows other people to be able to be vulnerable. So if my imposter syndrome had stopped me from making this podcast, there wouldn't be a space with which we could talk about this in the first place. Because having these conversations has inspired me so much throughout the duration of like when we started this thing, that, you know, I just feel much more heartened by it. And I'm like, if I feel that way, then that feeling could be brought to other people. And if that imposter syndrome is holding that back, then that's a whole thing that people are not receiving. And I think that it's, you know, like it's just preventing you from putting out more good into the world. And I'm trying to like war against that feeling and make sure that I stop it from, you know, keeping me from doing cool things and, you know, being some kind of community leader, question mark. That sounds weird to say, but it's, you know, it's what it could evolve into. And I have to be okay with that and not afraid of that, or I have to be afraid of it and do it anyway, is really what it is. Do or do not, there is no try. So it's, you know, it's just, it's a tricky balance to have to strike, to acknowledge it's there and to know how to fight against it. Manifest that image for yourself.
Yep.
Because like manifesting is actually a really good way to, like, even if the imposter syndrome doesn't go away, it still allows you to kind of see what the future could look like, and it allows you to kind of like fill in those blanks of like how you can actually get there. Yeah, really what it is like if you would like imagine yourself on that stage and you think, how do I get there, but you see yourself actually doing it, or you see yourself like, what does it look like if I'm a successful independent illustrator, and I visualize my Etsy store full of just all these things and my convention tables full of art books and beautiful prints that are all of a series and this very consistent voice. I'm like, okay, I see what that looks like. So at least there's an image that's in front of me that I can aim for, that gives me an idea of how to get there. And then you can start filling in the gaps of researching or looking up or doing your due diligence of how to actually achieve that visual of yourself. So that's what it looks like for me. What does it look like for you, Mia? Like, what does your ideal self look like?
Oh God, you know,
Ideal state, I guess.
when you brought this up, I was like, I don't do this enough, and that's part of the problem, because I think you're right. When you're taking your mind from that spiraling of I'm not worthy, I can't do this, blah blah blah, it's because you don't have like what you're doing is you're visualizing how it would look, and when you don't have any answers, it just feels like you're, you know, you're just out at open sea without any direction, right? So
Yeah.
when I first started doing conventions, I did do a lot of research, and I was actually like scared to go in too early until I had all the facts. So sometimes I like over prepare, and I like over research how other people do it, or do the math or do the numbers, like to see if I can afford to do the thing. But in terms of like the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, or the ideal me, I actually don't do that enough.
Yeah.
And I guess just because for so long I was not doing art as a living, for me it was just the low bar of getting to do art, just art to pay the bills is the ideal me. But in terms of how to get there, yeah, that would, it would help to sort of, you know, map out those steps so that I feel less like an imposter that will just never get there, because
Yeah.
you have a game plan of how you at least think you might do it, and that could change. But I think that's a great idea, actually, that you brought that up.
It's like if you're treading water, and it's like it's the difference between if you're treading water in an open ocean and you see nothing in front of you, and like versus the idea of you're treading water but there's an island in the distance that you just have to reach. You
Yeah,
actually see what's in front of you, and there's a path to get there.
right.
That's how I like to visualize it. What's your ideal state look like, Eric?
Hair and abs.
No,
Wait.
that's not what I
Oh, right.
I mean, that can, there's ways to get that too, but
It like takes work and creams and stuff. I ain't messing with that. Oh no. No, you know what? It keeps changing. So for over a decade, it was I wanted to do book covers, and I just kept like, it didn't matter how many people just told me, well, just be happy with what you have, and or stop trying. I kept trying. I just like, that was what I wanted to do. And uh you know, I just kept doing it until it got put into the right people's hands, or the right in front of the right eyes, or you know, or the right opportunities came along. But it would have never happened had I just said, screw it. I'm just gonna settle into whatever my life is right now and be done with it.
Mhm.
This is going to be my existence. Now I think about, I look at other illustrators that I admire, and I say, you know what, I want to go for that. I want to reach for that, and um, try to just think about what I can do to achieve that goal. Like how many followers do I need, or what, what has to happen to achieve that goal. But um, always with that goalpost, but it'll keep moving. That goalpost will keep moving. Like
Yeah.
as you get, as you progress in your career. A friend of mine told me about speed manifesting. Like, don't just do things and wait for life to change. You've got to make it change for you,
Hmm.
right? You have to be, uh, you know, you have to be an active participant in your own success.
But it's just interesting, like looking at the Facebook thread and seeing the amount of people who also like fight against it too. Like again, no matter what experience level, no matter what like place people are at, it's something that's kind of like a cloud over all of us. And yeah, like I want to continue to like talk about more methods to get rid of it and like what we can do to kind of prevent it from happening, or at least stop people from stopping themselves. Help stop people from stopping themselves.
I was just thinking back to flashback to like 15 years ago.
Ooh.
All my like horror stories are like from like a decade ago. But um, I was a working professional illustrator. I had a staff job working for an ad agency. It was like my first like real art job. Didn't feel like I belonged there. Um, it wasn't what I wanted to do. It was just something I applied for because I was just like, what the hell? I can't stay at Walmart forever, you know? And, but what I wanted to be doing was book covers. I wanted to be painting that stuff. And I, me and my friend from work, we would go to Barnes and Noble. This is at the New York City at the Time Warner Center. There was a Borders or Barnes and Noble, one of the two. But we would go there every lunch break, and I would go to the sci-fi fantasy book cover book section and look at the new releases, and just be like, just beat myself up, like, oh my god, like I'm not as good as this, or like, oh, this is the new so and so's cover, oh my god, this is amazing, oh, I could never do this. And not like forgetting for the moment that I'm actually a working illustrator. like, like I had my own place, I had a car, like these are the things, these are, but it wasn't enough. You just think, okay, well, this isn't where you want to be. But I was deathly afraid of actually putting my portfolio together and sending it out to the right people, because I kept thinking, well, it's not as easy as that. It's not as easy as just, because there was no Facebook or Instagram. It was MySpace. No art
My,
directors on MySpace.
MySpace. Oh my gosh.
So like if you
Go
didn't
back.
go to a convention or like make friends and have an art director, saying email me your samples, like I don't know how people got into the industry. I really don't. But that was the frustration of that whole time, is how do I get this work? How do I, or if even if I knew how to get it, do I think am I good enough? Am I good
Mhm.
enough? It'll be the next sample will be good enough. The next sample, it'll be the next sample. Then I'll go to New York Comic Con and I'll show it to the right person. But then you get in line to show that portfolio, the Image Comics or whatever the studio is at New York Comic Con, and the feet get wobbly, the hands get sweaty.
Mhm.
You go, this portfolio needs one more solid piece. I'm just, next year will be the year. And it's always next year will be the year. And you keep
Yeah.
putting it off and putting it off. And it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. Um, but I also remember the first time that a convention invited me to be a guest of honor. I was in the back of my head thinking, how many people like me? You want? I haven't done anything. Like, what do you want me? Like, what do you want me to? What am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? They wanted to like, oh, you should do some panels and do some workshops. What? So like, I'm going to teach people how to paint or something, or what am I going to? I went over that in my head, and then while I was at the convention, kept thinking to myself, how many people turn this down before they even bothered? Like, how low down the list was I? Like, just like
No.
continually punching myself in the face
No.
throughout the whole thing.
That's such imposter syndrome.
It was the worst. It was the worst. It was the worst. But you know, so like I rock both sides of that fence. So in some respects, I don't understand it when it comes to the art creation, but then in other aspects, I think, you know what? I had a horrible decade. I was just going back and forth in my own head. So yeah.
And sometimes you really have to look back and remember, because you forget how it felt to be in that space if you've gotten past it since then. Yeah, it's just like another thing that I've done like in the past was like, speaking of being on panels and stuff, I always try to manifest this vision of what I should be doing and like what kind of lofty goals I had that were ahead of me, and things that I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but I think I want to get there anyway. I remember a few months ago, I found this old sketchbook that I had back when I was in SCAD that I had written in when I was attending a panel with a bunch of amazing like people in it. I believe like Christoph Niemann and like, like Yoko Shimizu. Or Yuko Shimizu was like on that panel, and I was just like watching them in awe of like these just amazing illustrators who were doing great things and publishing their own books. And I remember I had written in the margins of my sketchbook, I was like, I want to be on that stage. I will be on that stage. Like this is a little hopeful student. I was like, I think I can do this too. And now like a week ago, somebody from SCAD reached out to me and they were like, hey, do you want to do a panel as a part of our Alumni Voices, like, this film festival thing? And I'm like, am I gonna be on that stage? That's weird. Do I deserve to be on that stage? Like, I'm just trying to do. And like, I'm gonna accept it, obviously, but it's, it's always a battle of like, looking behind you and being like, are you sure you didn't mean that one over there? Like, why am I the one? Because you do look at all the people who are around you and you're like, but why don't they deserve it? And why don't they deserve it? But why aren't we asking ourselves the question, why don't we deserve it?
Yeah.
At what point does imposter syndrome become self-sabotage? And I think that's when it starts to get really toxic. And I can see that in what a lot of people do, like, it's just like, if you don't think that you deserve stuff consistently enough, then you're not going to go for anything that you don't feel like you deserve. And that's what I've been trying to not be like my whole life. And I still have that thought in the back of my head. It's like, but why do you deserve this? Like, aren't you so much aren't you so much less talented than all these people? Again, social media, you see it in stark contrast. When I was at SCAD, I definitely felt like I didn't measure up to anybody. And so I was just lost in grad school for 2 years. And I was just not trusting myself. Like, I just didn't have that faith in myself that I could be good enough. And I'm still trying to get that back now.
Oh man, there's so many things that you said there that I just like, oh my gosh, yes, that like the feeling of not worthy. I've heard that from so many of my artist friends, that like even working at amazing places, and I'm like, people would kill to have that job and they just don't feel worthy, and they're so good. And it's almost like they don't know how good they are. And it's like, it's kind of good to not know how good you are, because you won't be cocky, but to the point that it makes you not even appreciate or understand why you're at that place. And that if it's like you said, is self-detrimental, I think that's when like you should go to therapy, or, like talk to friends about it, and but really try to get to the root of that, because I feel like that lack of worthiness, like, is beyond art, you know, it's like, it's a
Yeah.
deeper personal thing. It's something, and, you know, we all started making art when we were little kids to impress our parents, to impress, you know, grown-ups, to impress our
Hmm.
friends, you know, and there is definitely that sense of validation that we still crave, you know, through our careers with our art, that you're still kind of trying to get that reaction that you got when you were a little kid to some extent. But I think that there was also that love that we had of just doing it. And that's the thing I hear a lot too, is like, even people that aren't competitive with other artists, but they just want to be their best self, and they're just so hard on themselves, and especially in some cultures too, where culturally, like, people are really hard on their children for not being perfect or whatever. Like, I have friends that fall into that camp as well, where it's just like, you're almost like merciless with yourself if you're not your very best every single time, and you're a human being, you know. It's like, you're just,
Yeah.
as long as you're moving forward and you're trying and you're passionate and you love what you're doing, it doesn't matter so much how good you are, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think that that's something that's really ingrained in us too, that we have to be like the very best that we can be as an artist. And it's like, I don't know, I've really shed that over the years, but I remember my younger self, I used to really care about that a lot.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And like, you know, a lot of times too, like that thought process is so detrimental, not just in the way that you start to kind of feel less about yourself, but also that you're opening yourself up to be taken advantage of by other people because you don't feel like you're deserving of more.
Right.
You know, there's been a lot of people, especially in animation, I feel like it happens a lot in animation, where it's the labor is just almost exploitative of just the amount of hours people are expected to work and the amount of things that they're supposed to turn in. And when they don't turn in these impossible standards, they don't feel like, they're like, oh, I just don't feel like I'm good enough. When in reality, it's like, why are you expected to turn in all the stuff in the first place? I was just talking to, you know, an old friend of mine from SCAD, and you know, she was working at an animation studio that was just demanding all of the stuff from her, and she wasn't sleeping, and she was so stressed out and just crying. And I'm like, why are you letting them do this to you? And she was like, I just feel like I don't feel like I'm good enough, and I don't know if I can work anywhere else. And I saw all these other artists who are doing amazing. And I'm like, just talk to them, like talk to your coworkers, see how they're doing, and see if they're also feeling like the strain, because all you're seeing is the end result. You're not seeing the journey that like got them to turn in all these files. And it sounds to me like you're doing all the things you're supposed to be doing, but there's just way too high demands. And eventually she did end up talking to her coworkers and realized that she was not the only one who felt like that. They all didn't feel like they were good enough. And it just, thinking in that thought process really does allow you to kind of fall into that pattern of just be like, just keep grinding and grinding, and maybe one day I'll be good enough. But it's like, you also need to take care of yourself too. You can't let other people force you to do things that are detrimental to your health and are making you feel so terrible. Like, you just don't recognize when to walk away, and you feel like you can't walk away. It's almost like an abusive relationship with your own mind in
Yeah.
that way. It's just trapping you into this pattern of just like, I don't deserve this. I'm not good enough, so I can't leave. And I'm like, but you can though.
You
You
can't.
just haven't found out yet. I'm like, apply to other places and see your worth. It's always really good to do that, by the way. Artists, seriously, if you're trapped in the job that you don't like, just apply to some other places. You don't have to take the job. Just get that validation. Just know what you're worth, because oftentimes you'll get an offer and you'll be like, oh, I'm actually worth a lot more money than, you know, what I was doing before. And the industry shouldn't have to be set up to where we have to play these games, but unfortunately it's the reality of the situation. So it's always good to kind of check in a little bit. So just putting that out there, putting that energy out there, if like you're worth more than that. Don't let a job exploit you. But imposter syndrome will do that to you.
You know what's messed up is that that feeling, that self-doubt extends even after you have made it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like where you become, at some point you become in demand, or some industry veteran or something like that. And there's this, now it's a new fear. Now it's, well, can I keep up with people half my age that are after my jobs, or after my position, or something like that, and they're trying to copy my style, or do this or do that, you know, or, you know, how long is it going to be before the art director stop calling? What do I have to do? What new program do I have to learn? Or can I learn it? Or am I going to just fade away? You know, I've talked to guys that's they're rock stars. And that's the conversation we have over dinner. I'm like, are you serious?
Yeah.
I can't believe that. But it's a vicious loop. You start out doubting yourself. You're already like, oh man, it's messed up. It's really messed up. But what I also ask you guys is, have you talked to anybody in other careers outside of art that experience imposter syndrome? Because my wife's a nurse, and she said that she felt it back when she first started working in the ER, but like she had to shake it off because you can't, like, somebody could die. Like,
yeah, there's no time.
That's
like, you gotta save a life.
Like, I don't know if I could do this IV. We're like, no,
You don't do this IV.
So
it's so high stakes. Yeah.
I'm sure actors feel it, I'm sure athletes feel it too. Like, I feel like any sort of career where there's like big expectations in terms of somebody being, making a mark of some kind, that's similar in that way to art, where it's like painting and drawing, where it's like you're supposed to, I don't know, have a voice or have a vision or be among other people who are really well known. But yeah, I don't actually, most of my friends are artists, so I don't I don't actually know. But
I mean, like my mom has it. Like she's a counselor, like a school counselor, and she always like feels like she has to like kind of top herself and do more and more and more. And like that's a different kind of field, but it's still very much like she's putting a lot on herself because she wants to continuously be good enough. And a lot of I'm trying to think of anybody else I know. I don't think my dad has it. But I guess I should talk to him about it. That'd be a fun conversation. I was like, hey dad, do you have imposter? He's an electrical engineer, so it's like completely different. But yeah, like I feel like it's an issue that definitely, like, I feel like it plagues the creative fields for sure, between artists, between like authors, between just like any like musicians, etc. Just feeling like they're not good enough because what our work stems from is our ability to imagine and create and put, like, really, like, we feel like it's ourselves out there because it's like what we've cultivated with our own hands, our own voices, our own minds. And so I feel like it's even more what is the word I'm looking for, ubiquitous, than it is with like careers that are more of just completely blue collar or skill based or stuff like that. Like I just feel like because it's creative, it just pervades the space. But I know that it happens in so many other industries too. But I am curious as to how badly it does plague other fields. I would love to ask more people about that.
I'm sure writers are like,
oh yeah, writers get it bad.
Oh yeah,
it's got to be horrible. Oh, so what do you do for a living? I'm a writer. Oh, what have you written? Oh, well, I'm still working on it. Oh.
You can't
or I self-published a thing once. Where does it,
yeah,
you got to answer questions.
You have to know how to pitch your story too. Like you have to really be confident enough to speak about like what the premise of the thing is, which is something I'm gonna have to learn because I'm writing something, and I know Mia, you have to deal with that too. So it's really stressful because you're like, this idea has to be good enough for you to get into my story. It's not like art where you can just be like, hey, here's a picture, isn't it pretty? Yeah, you can't hold up words. They have to look at those words and like digest them. So it's even trickier for writers. But there's like, here's the thing, there are so many crappy books out there. And the fact of the matter is those writers, they finished it. That's crazy to me. It's terrible. There's that one guy who like writes those like horrible, like trashy novels about like, it's a like a dinosaur, like it's like a romance novel with COVID. Like, what's his name? Have you ever heard of this guy before?
No.
He does so many
COVID and romance.
Like, no, COVID like is like the thing that you have to romance or like whatever. Like COVID is like a character, and he writes stuff like this all the time. And I don't know if he does it as a parody, but this guy writes so many stories. He has a ton of books. Like, he's huge. Wow. And these are so silly, and we're just like, what is that? Like, that's crazy. But he's doing it anyway. I'm proud of him for putting it out there because it's crazy and he's still doing it. Like, if that's out in the world, why can't I put my crazy idea out there too?
That's such a good point, because it's like we all torture ourselves over doing the thing, and is my idea any good, and is this thing, and am I any good? And there's some people just like, I'm just gonna go out in here and do it, and it's like it goes back to do or do not. It's like I think that is a great cure for imposter syndrome, at least to snap yourself out of it. And that's
Mhm.
something my therapist has been trying to teach me in terms of like catch yourself when you're in that negative spiral. And
Yeah.
for me, the thing that blocks the thinking is doing, because it's so opposite of that, or if I'm worrying or having anxiety about stuff, it's usually about the past or about the future. So instead I've been trying to snap myself out of that and just focus on the present. And so finding a way to snap yourself out of that spiral, whatever it is for you, whether it's being active, like working out or something, or putting on music or something that snaps you out of that funk, because it wastes so much time. And you're right, in the meantime, these people are writing shitty books and getting them published. And
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's like it's the whole theory of there was this meme that I had shared around before and I saw it and it resonated so strongly with me of I think I might have talked about this before too, but it was like an artist going up to a table and putting their cake on the table, and it's a crappy little cake, but it's like, next to this beautiful two-tiered cake, decorated and everything. And they're looking at that cake, they're like, oh, my cake is not as good as that artist is, or like that cake maker made better cake than I did. And then next panel is somebody coming up to the table with a fork and a knife and like, holy shit, 2 cakes.
yeah,
Simple, effective.
yeah,
Like, why not put that cake out there? Why
totally.
not?
And you know what most, oh, sorry, go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just going to say that um, one thing that pulls me back into the present instead of dipping into thinking or having that self-doubt about trying something new or doing something new is talking to older folks, talking
Mm.
to, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s. You don't want to, the last thing you want is to be in your later years with a regret. I wish
Yeah.
I would have
Totally.
I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that, instead of being so scared or so in my head about it instead of just doing it,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But, yeah, it's when I guess when you find yourself in that headspace, like stopping, pausing. I know so many artists with anxiety. It's weird. I guess it just comes with it. Like, or are we all just supposed to have anxiety? Like, is that?
I feel like I
Is
didn't
it
start with it, but I definitely have it now.
like, I don't know if it's like because I know like Van Gogh was kind of crazy, but he was like eating the paint and it was like lead in it. It was affecting his brain. But
Yeah.
like, what are we absorbing that's messing us up?
Our own creative energy. Brains are wired differently, so we got to be wired differently.
Yeah, it's just wrong. But anyway, so trying to stay in the moment is hard. I know we could sit here with a bunch of, oh, here's how you can combat imposter syndrome, but it's easier said than done. I mean,
Yeah.
trying to tell me to stay in the moment instead of having my brain race off in 1,000 different ways, all negative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a daily struggle. Like, it doesn't matter like how many times, like if there's a day where I succeed at it, then the next day it's like starting all over. So yeah, I know those are the things that's the funny thing. My friend and I that were recently talking about this, we were saying, I know the things that work and I know the things that trap me, but I still fall into them. And that's the really frustrating part, is like, it's almost like I know the way out, but I don't know how to do it, because it starts over every day.
So for you guys, does the imposter syndrome part of it come in when you are comparing yourself to others, or do you, while actively painting whatever it is that you're painting, sit there and say to yourself, I don't think I could do this, or this is no good, I need to just walk away? Like, are you confident in the moment when you are creating? So the question is it from outside stimuli, or is it you having doubt about your own technical ability?
I think it's neither for me. It's much more, it's an internal thing. But when if I've gotten to the point where I'm actually drawing the thing and I'm finishing the thing, I've gotten past that bit of it. Like, that's just, I'm doing it. And for me, I'm long past comparing myself to people because I know that my point of view is my point of view, and I know that there's going to be people who do amazing things and people who do okay things and things that I just admire, but I know that my stuff is just over here. I'm doing my own thing. Where I stop myself, and this is something that's really hard to admit, is almost a fear of like, I'm if I do this thing well, now there's a standard that I have to keep upholding. What if my next piece isn't good enough? What if I'm letting everybody down by making a piece that isn't as to par as the expectations that have been placed upon me? I think that's where my imposter syndrome with my personal creativity comes from. The fear of letting people down.
Mine's similar because it's like I feel like I've done pieces that I've been proud of in the past, but enough of them that I'm also not, and that my expectation of the next piece. So it's always before starting something that it's like it's not going to be as good as this thing, or it's just going to be terrible. Like that's my expectation. It's like that the shoulder devil is saying what you do is going to be garbage, so don't even do it. And that
Mhm.
happens with drawing and painting. It happens less with drawing because I feel like more natural with that. And even though I have a lot to learn with drawing, for some reason I can just pick up a pencil and just start drawing without that getting in the way. But for painting and definitely writing, I feel like before I start, and even while I'm writing sometimes, because that's still so new to me, I get that like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You know, like while I'm doing it. But with painting, I think it's like Lauren said, as soon as I start, I just finish it. But it's always like the getting started. My inner voice is just saying it's going to be awful, and it doesn't matter how successful I was at anything in the past. And again, that's something my therapist is trying to work with me too. She's like saying, you have a track record of things you've completed, look at all the work you've done. And yet my brain says, but I can't, you know. And that's almost like programmed in me, and that's what I'm trying to break. It's like there's people who their programming is I can, no matter what, whether they've never done it before, you know, whether it's something that they're learning, whether it's something they're getting paid for that they've never done. Their mindset is I can, and mine is
Yeah.
just I've done it before somehow, but you know, I'm probably gonna fuck it up, you know?
Yeah. You're thinking that last time is like, oh, maybe that last time was a fluke. Maybe that wasn't really. And like that's what happened after my the mushroom queen piece. I was like, maybe this is just a fluke. And then I did the rose queen piece, and that one's turning out the way I wanted it to. And I'm like, this is weird. I don't know how to feel about this. I need to make this whole series, but I don't want the next one to be a fluke but this is ridiculous. Like
It
I
doesn't
know that it's irrational. I know that it's stupid, but that's where it comes from. I think it stems to anxiety, but it's just that fear of like, my parents, they worked so hard to support me and get me to where I need to go. I can't let them down. Like I have all these expectations that I have to meet. And that can psych you out so much. But I know it's stupid. And it's something that I have a therapist too. I'm working on that as well. And just I have to talk it out and not let it stop me from doing the things that I know I can do. So yeah, but right now I think that's so much why it's so much easier to deal with absolutes where I have this freelance job. I know exactly what I need to do to complete it. I know it's probably going to turn out fine. I have a brief, I have something to stick to. But when it's open-ended like that, and when there's an expectation of my own personal work, that's when it changes. I'm like, this idea is not deep enough. It's not saying enough about blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and then I see people who have like 200,000 followers, and it's like the simplest thing. It's just, they put their art out there. It's a simple message, accessible to an audience. No big deal. Like why? Like why would my work be any less valid than that? Or like why is their work? I wouldn't think their work isn't valid. So why wouldn't I think my work is valid? Like it doesn't make any sense. There's just a mountain that feels infinite that we're climbing, and there's a top to it. We just have to find that top. We have to be willing to get to that top, is what it is. I think a lot of people aren't willing to break out of it because it's almost comfortable being in a space of imposter syndrome, because if we have this doubt or something negative that's like not making our lives perfect, then maybe there's not another shoe that's going to drop, because the imposter syndrome is the shoe that's about to drop.
It's an excuse.
So
It's an out, you know?
yeah, there's almost comfort in that anxiety in a way, and that is a notion that needs to be dispelled immediately, because that's so stupid.
There is no comfort for me in anxiety of any kind.
Yeah.
Relating to my professional or personal life. I am jealous of both of you for having therapists that you can go talk to.
You should you don't be jealous.
I am jealous because all I get to do is punch the air. No, I don't even
I mean,
So
they're expensive, but they're worth it.
You need a
Yeah.
therapist. You can get a therapist. I mean, I think everybody. I recommend this for people who are happy, people who are sad, people who are dealing with anxiety, literally any walk of life. Having somebody to listen to you, like, air out the things that everybody has baggage in some form or another. There's no one who has escaped baggage. There's nobody with a perfect life. Everybody needs a therapist, or everybody should have a therapist. I think it's a recommendation for anybody. There's such a taboo around it, but seriously, getting to work out your issues and find healthy ways to deal with these things, even if you can't solve those problems, healthy ways to cope with it is so important for anybody's life. I think I highly recommend it. Obviously, if you can afford it. I know that a lot of people can't afford it, but I know that there's also apps out there. I think BetterHelp is one of them that has more affordable care. So I feel like there's an avenue for everybody, especially now that everything's online. You can get virtual therapy without having to rely on going into a place or whoever's around you. You can probably get a therapist anywhere. So I would highly recommend it, Eric. You don't have to punch the air.
Yeah. It takes some of that pressure off of you too. It's like, I don't have to solve all of it. Like, like you have, I don't know. I feel like that's part of it too, that we all think that we have to do everything ourselves. And, you rely on your partner for some things, and you rely on your friends for other things, and a therapist for the big heavy things, that maybe other people in your life shouldn't be supporting some of those things, or that you shouldn't be carrying it all. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And admitting it is actually kind of liberating. Like for me, when I first admitted I needed help and I couldn't do it alone, it was actually it felt good to admit that.
It can be really hard to ask for help. I still have problems with asking for help. Like even at work, like just delegating stuff, it's very difficult for me to just delegate things. And so I think therapy is delegating a lot of that mental load to somebody who's actually paid and qualified to take it on. Because I tend to be a mediator and a sounding board for a lot of my friends, but there's always a certain point that I get to in the conversation where I hear them and I'm like, I'm not qualified to actually help you through this. This is where my responsibilities end, because I'm going to be damaging if I try to offer any more advice, because I am not qualified to do so. Yeah. Like, I think you might need a therapist. And so I feel like if anybody gets to that point, it's like, that's when you need it. And I think that's really, really important. Because imposter syndrome really not a one size fits all situation. There's not one solution to fixing it. But, if you can get the help that you need or find the coping mechanisms that you need, go down that journey of solving it, because living with it without doing anything about it, that's another form of self-sabotage.
Yeah. And I think about all of the artistic idols, and rock stars, and people we've had the opportunity to know or speak to at conventions, and just all the people we've met in our professional life. And you don't know what internal struggle they're going through, even with their social media posts looking like it's all a day at the beach, and check out this cool thing I drew, and with like 5 million likes and stuff like that, and you're like, they probably punch the air and hate themselves, or you say that you think, you hope they do.
It makes you feel a little bit better.
Like, I'm
not the only one.
So yeah,
but really a lot of them do. I mean, a big way that I learned how to deal with mine was talking to people I really admired, had been doing this for years, and hearing that they still deal with it too. You realize how pervasive it really is. It's like, oh, like, how are you dealing? I look up to you so much. Like, how could you? I remember who posted, one of my friends posted a Twitter post where they said Kim Jong-gi had said at Lightbox that he dealt with imposter syndrome. And I'm like, how? You're like one of the best people I know. Like, how?
Yeah.
Somebody like that deals with imposter syndrome. And so if they deal with that, then I feel like, it's a thing that I can admit to myself that, it's there for me too. And I can work through it because I know I'm not alone at the very
honestly, I feel like that guy was just paid to say that.
No.
He said it and was like, to slide me my cash.
We don't know his life.
No, we don't. And honestly, for some
just give me my money.
the more eyeballs on his stuff, maybe he feels like he hasn't earned it, you know, maybe like,
Yeah.
again, those people that we admire, they have artists that they admire that are even better and that they think like they need to aspire to that level. So I could totally see that where he's just like, my work's not enough or something. Like he's aspiring to something we can't even see, but
Yeah.
still aspiring to something. But I actually want to flip back. I want to ask you something, Eric, since you seemed like the most like in control of this part of imposter syndrome out of the three of us. What would you say to the artists? Because we've talked a little bit about artists that have made it or are making it and that kind of stuff. But like you said towards the beginning that you felt imposter syndrome the most like before you got the jobs, before you got the steady work, and before you could like see your space in that industry. And there's a lot of artists that feel that imposter syndrome because they haven't broken in yet and because it feels so insurmountable and everyone they see on social media seems to have made it somehow or something. I'm just curious how you got out of that and any advice that you would give to people.
I shook it off through experience. One experience led to another, which led to another. And then after a while, I said, you know what? I know how to do this. I'm not that voice in the back of my head going, you suck. Like it wasn't there anymore because I could just go, you know what? No, I don't. No, I don't. This big company contacted me for a reason. I don't know why, but they said, you know what? That's the person we want for this. And I could say, you know what? Okay. And then I know I've also talked to artists like professional, been in the industry for a while that choke when a big client comes along and they go, oh my God, like, am I good enough to get this work, to do this job that they want me to do? I never think about that. I never think about who's going to look at the work after it leaves my studio. After I send that file, I never think about who's going to see it. Because because that was what my friend was telling me. He just got so stressed out about who was going to see that magic card, you know, or how many people were going to play it. And he just froze up. He couldn't complete the job. And it just, every piece of art you make makes you more confident about how to make that art. Every portrait you paint, everything, it's all practice. So by the time any client, whether they're big or small, comes along and offers you a chance to prove what you know in your heart you love to do, and you do it successfully, that little voice, at least for some people, slowly starts to like quiet. Mm-hmm. And then that positive voice going, yeah, I knew you could do it. Now just do it again. Like find somebody else that wants you to do it again. But between those gigs where you got that positive voice cheering you on, going, yeah, I knew you could do it. If something doesn't come along soon enough, now that doubt comes in and goes, I knew you sucked. Yeah. That was a fluke. Yeah. But if you as you keep going, the more you do it, the more confident you're going to get, and the more your stuff is out there, like the work is going to get you work. And I know there's somebody watching this right now that is just like super frustrated by the fact that they know they're good, but nobody has opened the door and said, come on in.
I have several friends going through that right now.
That was my life for over a decade when it came to a certain type of work that I wanted to do. But in those situations, I also diversified my portfolio. I didn't just say, I'm only going to try to find work as a sci-fi fantasy illustrator, because I knew that there weren't, for one, I didn't know of any other Black sci-fi fantasy illustrators. I couldn't call up anybody and go, how did you do it? You know? And I wasn't seeing a lot of diversity in the art. So I thought, well, there's no point in me making a portfolio full of Black faces to send off to XYZ clients, because they're not using that. So I, for a good 10 years, did stuff in advertising and storyboards and all kinds of other stuff, and came back around every once in a while, came back around with a new piece and submitted it to dream clients. But yeah, that's what I would just tell them. Just keep doing it.
I think if I had anything to say to the students, aside from what we've already said, with like, get therapy and find healthy coping mechanisms of just pushing through it anyway, is if if you tried all of those things and none of those work, the funny thing that I like to try is just like pushing past it and being like, haha, I've tricked all of you. I've tricked all of you, and now I'm so clever. I'm such a genius. I've done it anyway. But just go for it. Just go for it anyway. Even if you have to pretend or like to put on a persona of just like, you know what, I'm going to go into this interview as if I know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's great, especially if you do know what you're talking about. That in my professional career, my imposter syndrome hasn't plagued me as much because I'm at the point now where I'm a manager, and I've gotten there because I've been a manager for 6 years now. So it's weird, but I know what I'm doing. It's very strange to admit that, but I know. Like they were like asking about some like how to fix something at work, and I was like, actually, I've done this before, and let me tell you how to do it. And like I was like, oh, that was like the first time where I was like really like I knew what I was talking about, and I was able to help. Like that felt weird, but that feeling is starting to feel more comfortable now. But before you get to that point, just like try to collect all the knowledge you can and try to just push past that feeling, that wall that you're going through. Don't let it prevent you from doing anything that you want to do, because like Eric said, you don't want to be older and unable to do it because you have more responsibilities or more things that aren't allowing you to do all the things that you wanted to do. You don't want to have those regrets because you stopped yourself because this imposter syndrome was telling you you're not good enough. Like again, like think about all the things that are out in the world, and think about all the crappy things that are out in the world, and know that no matter what, your thing is probably not going to be the crappiest. It's okay to just put it out there in the world anyway. I'm sure that some people will celebrate it, and the more you do it, the more you will get fans, the more you will have that validation, that feedback loop. Everybody needs that. And just even if that feeling doesn't go away, just don't let it prevent you from expressing your voice and expressing yourself, or going after that job that you really wanted to go after, or breaking out and going independent. It can be scary. But another thing that I will say too is that before you take any risk, try to make sure that you have a safety net, at least, one's like 1, 2 safety nets, plan A, B, and C. Because that's kind of how I am. I can't just like say go on with a blind confidence, because everybody doesn't have the same situation. Everybody's not financially secure. But if you can make contingency plans so that even if things go bad, even if you're like, I'm not good enough for this job, sometimes people aren't good enough for the job. But if you have another plan, then maybe you're good enough for something else, or maybe that's just not the field for you. Just keep trying until something works, though, because there's something that works for everybody. As long as you have a modicum of intelligence, you can find something that works for you. So just make sure that you plan for your imposter syndrome while you're working through it, is what I would say to younger people. All right, before we go, Mia, I need you and like just like to say how good of an artist you are and how good of a writer you are. Just say it.
No, wait,
Please.
why? Wait, why? Wait, why are we doing this?
Because you are, and I want you to say it.
How about this? This is something I can say.
Mia!
This is what's true for me. It's like it doesn't actually matter whether I'm good or not, because that is subjective. What matters is that I love what I'm doing, and I would do it every day anyway, whether I'm good or not. And that was the other thing I was going to say. If you would do it anyway, even if your worst fears about yourself were true, then you should keep doing it, and it shouldn't matter whether you're good or not. But yeah, for me, it's more important that I love what I'm doing, and I want to keep getting better. But it's like, if you like it, that's subjective, and I like doing it, and that's enough for me. So there.
I like that. I'll rephrase it then, of like, it's the thing that you're proud of about yourself. So Eric, Mia, since you've already said it, which is just wonderful, what are you proud of yourself for?
What am I proud of myself for?
Mm-hmm. Why is this so hard?
I mean, like, wait, hold on a second. All right.
Do this.
All right, wait, no. What, like art? Are we talking art related stuff or just in general? What am I?
I mean, related to the subject of imposter syndrome, art related or otherwise. Like, what are you proud of yourself for?
You know what? That I'm able to suppress it long enough to do the job. I think is the thing I'm most proud, because there was the concept art job led to other stuff, but the concept art job that I had done, I held on to for 4 years and had that imposter syndrome for the full 4 years. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. And I kept thinking to myself, at some point, they're going to realize I'm a fraud and they're going to say, no, actually, you stay home. We're going to let What a Workshop do this for us instead, or something like that. I always thought I was going to get fired. Always thought I was going to get fired. And they didn't. They're like, wow. And then over that, that was my kind of that trial by fire. Like that was the moment where I said to myself, maybe you do know what you're doing. All right. Well, just stay in that headspace when you're on the job. When the jobs end, then you can let that self-doubt creep in. But while you're doing it, I'm proud that I can just dial it down.
Yeah.
Having positive people in your life.
Yeah. And actually surrounding yourself with those people, like having a community of people who aren't negative overwhelmingly, because that negativity can also drag you down and make you feel like you're less than. Or if there's people who are just not motivated enough, like they just like have given up. If you're around those people all the time, then you're going to adopt that mentality too. But having a positive art community has been so beneficial for me. And, you know, between meeting people at conventions, between school, between different art groups, you know, here in Austin, just all these people trying to work and be their best and not being cocky about it, but just genuinely trying to be an active learner and student is really inspiring. And that has no choice but to help lift you up too. So that's something that I think everybody needs in their life in one way or another. And there's always a group of people who you can find that with. You can find that in our Facebook group, by the way. This just started. It's called the Painted and Color Discussion Group. Shameless plug, but it's a community where I want to continue to foster that continuous conversation of being vulnerable and being open to learning from other people and just seeing that you're not the only one who's going through these issues. Like I post questions about imposter syndrome and starting a big project and the things that stop you or the things like the ways you keep going. So I want that feedback loop to continue. But yeah, the last thing is like, I guess the thing that I'm proud of about myself is the fact that when I was younger, I used to also be a very shy person. And I forced myself into so many situations just so I could overcome those shortcomings that I felt I had about myself. I never thought that I would be a manager. I never thought that I'd be a lead. I never thought that I would ever be on stage doing panels or on YouTube doing a podcast or, you know, like on like, you know, just like articles and stuff like that. Like I just never thought that that was the kind of person or the kinds of things I could be doing. But the fact that I had opened myself up to having these opportunities and experiences and trusted myself enough to do them, even if I doubted myself inside, but did it anyway. Like that's what I'm proud of, is the fact that I'm still going and that I've done it mostly. Like obviously I have a big support network around me in terms of friends. My family is really good, but financially I've been independent like since leaving college, and I've been able to support myself on that alone. And I'm really proud of myself for that. And I'm proud of my ideas and I like the things that I'm making. I just need to make more of them. And I need to embody that pride and let myself feel that. And I think that's why I asked that question, is because I think oftentimes we don't stop to ask ourselves the question of like, but what have I accomplished? What have I actually done? Because you'll find that list is way longer than your normal thought process actually allows you to think it is. We're still here and we're still fighting.
Exactly.
So keep fighting, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in this conversation with us. And thank you for watching this episode. It was really open and candid, and there was a lot of stuff that came out. I know this is a long one, but thank you for sticking with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.